Welcome to the Feels Club. My name is Mauricio Leguan. I'm your host. Today's topic is LGBTQIA plus community and mental health. I want to start off by saying that the LGBTQIA plus community is vast and large. So today we're going to be talking about trends and commonalities, but we acknowledge that everyone in that community and in every community is not a monolith, meaning that not everyone has the same experience. So we're going to be talking about trends, we're going to be talking about commonalities and things that they experience in general, but everyone has a different experience. And so we'll also create some space for that. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. Their name is Andres Larios Brown, a licensed marriage and family therapist at Simple Modern Therapy, Utah-based practice that specializes in LGBTQIA care for individuals, couples, and families. We're so excited to have Andres on the podcast today. Welcome to the Feels Club, Andres.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Like, what led you to this line of work? Like, how long have you been doing it? Like, why? Like, it's so cool that you do this, and I love that Utah has a place for LGBTQIA mental health.
Yeah, it's been actually really fun. I came back to Utah specifically to do this work. But let's see here. I was 12 when I decided I wanted to be a marriage and family therapist. I know not very many 12-year-olds are kind of looking that far into the future, but I had kind of this sense of, I think I was a really sad child. I think I was interacting with some really complicated, difficult things. I think that's when I was really coming into my own queerness and recognizing who I was in relation to the culture, the environment, the religion that I was in. So I think that really led to some really heavy feelings. And I remember one night particularly, I had gone to sleep feeling really sad, overwhelmed, hopeless. And then when I woke up in the morning, I had kind of this like epiphany where I decided that if I was going to continue to live my life, I wanted to find a way to make the world a better, kinder, more beautiful place. I didn't want anyone to feel as sad as I was feeling the night before. So then I get on my computer, and it was dial-up internet at the time, and I looked up careers that help people feel happy. And I found marriage and family therapy, and I said, that's what I want to do. So in a lot of ways, I'm living my 12-year-old self's dream now.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I truly admire that there is, like I said, a place for people to receive that kind of care here in Utah. We're going to be talking about the LGBTQIA community. Can you walk us through, some folks may not know, LGBTQIA plus.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what those mean? I think I know them all. Well, let me test my knowledge, actually.
Yeah.
Lesbian, gay, bi, bisexual, right? Transgender, LGBTQ is queer, I, intersex, asexual.
Yep.
And then plus, like, because there's a lot more.
Yeah, it's ever changing, it's ever expanding. I think that's one of the one of the key pieces of queerness is it's ongoing. We're continuing to kind of evolve and understand more about ourselves and our relation to others. And so there's a lot of kind of expansiveness in queerness generally.
Yeah, and I love that about queer studies. I've done a little bit of dabbling in it during my grad school program, gender studies specifically, but I learned so much from the intersection of gender and queer studies. And I love this topic. When we intersect that topic of the community with mental health, what's something that what comes to mind? Like, what do you want people to know about LGBTQIA plus community and mental health?
Often what I think about is how interwoven our identities are with how we feel about ourselves and our relationship with other people. I think often we look at kind of mental health as kind of an addendum to our experience, when in reality it's interwoven into everything that we do, everything that we are. So all of our kind of key aspects of our identity influence and impact, the way that we navigate things.
I mean, 100%. I love the identity part of it, because it is, we all have our own identity, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we all experience that identity and that intersection of our identity with our healthcare, our mental health care, our relationships. It bleeds into everything.
Yeah.
When you think about myths that exist out there around the LGBTQIA plus community, what's something that you wish from the get-go, as we're starting our conversation, that you just want to dispel and just, dispel the myth?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. I think the first one that comes up that once again is making a resurgence is that our identities are disorders.
Mm.
I think we do see that there's an overlap of LGBTQIA plus people who experience mental health concerns or issues, which makes a whole lot of sense when we look at the world, how scary, how hard it is, how many attacks we're getting from all these different angles, that it would impact things like anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. But I think one of the myths is that it's not inherently because of our queerness, but rather because we're in environments that don't celebrate our queerness.
Mm.
What I often tell my clients is our queerness is not a problem. Our queerness is only a problem in a society that doesn't celebrate queerness. In a society that celebrates queerness, there actually probably wouldn't be as big of an overlap or as much of a connection between LGBTQIA plus identity and mental health
Yeah,
distress.
yeah. I think that's such an important message to share with our listeners and with just people in general, right? It's not experiencing that identity that is a disorder or a mental health problem. It's the environment where
Yeah.
it's not accepted, it's not celebrated, it's not welcomed
Yeah.
that creates those conditions where mental health problems arise.
Very
What are
much.
some of those common mental health conditions, diagnoses that you see among the LGBTQIA community?
Yeah. I think primarily anxiety, which I think it's this really tricky balance for me as a therapist where I really want to honor somebody's experience and I want to contextualize it appropriately. So we see things like anxiety, which are things like increased heart rate, racing thoughts, discomfort in self, anticipatory worry about what's coming next.
Mm,
And
mm,
on its own, we can say like, oh, maybe that is a mental health concern.
sure.
And I think what's really important for us to recognize is it's actually a really important adaptation for us when we are in dangerous environments.
Yeah.
So helping us not internalize that there's something inherently wrong with us. In
Mhm.
fact, a lot of the work that I do with my clients is to help them really celebrate the fact that their nervous system is responding appropriately to dangerous environments.
Yep.
Hypervigilance makes sense if there's danger. And so we see a lot of anxiety in LGBTQIA plus people. But again, it's important for us to differentiate between an appropriate adaptation
Mhm.
and maybe a neurocognitive difficulty. Also, things like depression makes a whole lot of sense, right? When you're in a world where your opportunities are being really limited or the future feels really scary, things like lack of motivation, difficulty getting out of bed, difficulty taking care of yourself, all of that makes sense
Yeah,
in the
it does.
context where we're experiencing oppression.
Hmm. Hmm. I agree with you, and I see that happening with my queer friends and
Yeah.
members of the community. And I pressure test that with myself, right? Or with anyone. I'm like, okay, like if you were living in a world where you were constantly being told you can't do that, you can't be that, or you can't say that, or that's not the way you should wear your clothes or
Yeah.
style your hair, or then of course you would be hyper vigilant, one.
Yeah.
And in some ways, as a minoritized person, like I know what that feels like because yeah, like I was telling you before we started recording, like I moved from Los Angeles, a
Yeah.
predominantly brown, Black, Asian area, to Utah when I was 14. And I remember feeling like, can I be brown? Can I speak Spanish? Can
Yeah.
I do these things? And so that hypervigilance, like, which was natural, right? And I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say that my experience is the same as the LGBTQIA IA plus community, but it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That the lack of acceptance, the lack of welcoming, the lack of celebration of that community and of your identity and of who you are can cause things like anxiety, depression, stress,
Yeah.
which could lead to PTSD.
Yeah.
There was a term that I was learning about preparing for the podcast called minority stress.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you see what is minority stress, one,
Yeah.
and how do you see it show up in the LGBTQIA plus community?
Yeah, I think we're very much talking about it. It's kind of this hypervigilance or this ongoing awareness that the environment that you're in is not celebratory, conducive, or safe. And so we see that people experience higher levels of emotional, mental, and physical distress given this environment. We also see with minority stress that people also have barriers to get access to care because oftentimes those that are providing care can be also the source of the distress, of the pain, the fear, of the danger. And so it creates this really difficult environment for us to figure out, one, what's happening for us, and then two, to get the appropriate care.
That's difficult.
Yeah.
Because it's like, the line of work that I do outside of this podcast, we talk often about the compounding effects of microaggressions, macroaggressions, of exclusion. And those are just, I feel like we're scratching the surface on not only am I experiencing symptoms of anxiety, depression, exclusion in my day-to-day life, but when I'm trying to seek for help, I'm also going to come across those barriers.
That's actually, sorry.
No, please.
That's actually one of the main reasons I came back to Utah. I was in Oregon. That's where I did my graduate school, and was working there, living there. I met my husband there and was kind of thriving in Oregon. I had gone to Oregon when I came out. But then I started getting a number of conversion therapy survivors in my therapy office and recognizing, and they had lineage here in Utah. So I started recognizing that there needs to be more maybe advocacy, for lack of a better word, on increasing the quality of care for LGBTQIA plus people. I think we're often told that we should accept the bare minimum, that if somebody uses our correct pronouns, that's clinical excellence, when in reality, that's baseline. That's actually the floor of appropriate care. We then need to add on what are the unique interventions, models, approaches to working with, again, minority stress, the depression, the anxiety. And so I decided to come back to Utah to try to slow the river of harm that was happening for my community, because I recognized that I could only be one therapist for 1 hour with one client. And so rather than continuing to do that and trying to heal the people who are wounded, tried to kind of get ahead of that and say can we actually slow this process? Can we actually increase the quality of care for our community?
One of as I was reading your bio, you're a training director as well at Simple Modern Therapy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what does that entail? It feels like it's what allows you to expand your reach.
Yeah.
And then I would love to know members of the community should be looking for when finding care from a provider.
Yeah, great question. So about 1.5 years ago, my business partner and I, Heather Holmgren, opened up the Simple Modern Institute, which is primarily poised to help increase the level of confidence and competence for our fellow mental health providers in working with marginalized communities. We saw that there was a gap between people who are really wanting to be affirming, who care for LGBTQI plus people, but none of us have been really given the tools or the training to be able to do that. And so our mission is really kind of doing that specifically, talking about not only how do we increase awareness of maybe these mental health difficulties or concerns or disparities, how do we not only build knowledge and understanding about queerness, about our culture, about our history, but for us as therapists, how do we then translate that and transfer that into clinical skills? What changes for us in our clinical approach given our understanding and our increased awareness? And so we've been working really hard on kind of designing training specifically for working with LGBTQIA plus people. Again, not as an addendum, or I think for many of us in our clinical programs, we were taught about quote unquote working with diverse populations as like a chapter in a book, right? So it's like, here's standard practice for working with people generally. And then if somebody's brown or somebody's queer or somebody has these different identities, here's a chapter of how you adapt these models to work with them. Again,
it's far more complicated than that.
It's far more complicated than that.
And everyone is different, right? Like how you would approach someone who's brown versus black, an immigrant versus a refugee versus a queer person, to just the full put like an umbrella term, the diverse people.
100%.
Like that's just such a disservice.
Yeah. And I always found it interesting, and this is maybe going off on a little tangent, but I always found it interesting that those classes are also designed to teach majority identity people as opposed to those of us that hold these identities. So I was in these classes that were geared towards white, heteronormative, cisnormative people talking about working with diverse populations. when I was thinking, oh, a diverse population for me is actually working with a white person.
Yeah.
Working with a diverse population would be working with straight people.
Yeah.
And so it was this really interesting, again, recognition that one, our mental health profession is not neutral. What we choose to focus, what we choose to centralize, and by contrast, what we choose to deem as other has a certain bias, has a certain lens, which I think is why, again, we're really trying to combat that by saying, what if we imagined what LGBTQIA plus people need and we designed therapy around that, that we centralized queerness in our conceptualization of what, quote unquote, the problem is, what our role is as therapists, what interventions we use, what measures of health we use, rather than trying to transpose something that actually doesn't take into account the complexity of our experience.
So if I'm a member of the LGBTQIA community and I'm looking for a therapist, what are some things that you would say, hey, look out for these things from your therapist? They should be doing, or they should be messaging to you X things.
Yeah, I think it's a little complicated because I think, again, there's kind of marketing and then there's clinical practice.
Sure.
And so we can see things like people can have rainbow flags on their websites. They can use correct pronouns. They can even have rainbow flags in their office. I think for me, it's, again, reminding my community that we deserve the highest quality of care, not just good enough care. So being aware of, does my therapist understand the nuances of my experience, of my culture? Are they able to weave that into their clinical practice rather than, one, make assumptions about my identity and my experience, and then two, use me as a learning opportunity for them? As clients, we shouldn't be in a position to teach our therapists about our experiences.
Sure. Yeah.
And so maybe early on, asking questions like, what is your clinical training when working with LGBTQIA plus people? How have you interwoven that into your clinical practice rather than just taking an affirming stance? How do you take a clinically attuned stance to my community, my understanding? Well-intended people can do a lot of maybe marketing work without then recognizing what then needs to follow in order to be really congruent in affirming an appropriate clinical practice.
Yeah. It's nuanced, right? I often find thinking about my friends in the community that have looked for mental health care and received it. Oftentimes I find them like, I'm just looking for someone who's also gay or who's also lesbian or who's also queer in my way. Cause like there is like, and I relate to that in some ways, because I have had moments where I've sought talk therapy and I'm like, I just want someone who understands what it's like to be a child of immigrant parents. Like, you know, because there's nuance to it. There's all this stuff to it, and not to go on a tangent about it, but I understand that like oftentimes, but even that I will challenge, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the right level of care based on what you're sharing with me.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. One of my also kind of soapboxes is lived experience is not the same as learned expertise. And so we have to be able to pair, if we're coming from similar identities, we have to then understand, what does this mean for me clinically? So part of what I often will talk about with my clients is I understand what it means to be non-binary in my own personal life, and I understand what it means to be non-binary conceptually, theoretically. But I have to be really careful not to transpose my experience of being non-binary onto your experience of being non-binary. So I'll share that for me, being non-binary means that I hold both masculinity and femininity as complements, not as contradictions. I actually don't view them as opposing or mutually exclusive. I get to hold them, experience them, and express them together. I think they actually highlight each other really well. And I'm aware that that may not be your experience. So I think one of the most powerful tools as therapists is the phrase, tell me more.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your experience. I know my experience, and that can help create an environment that feels safer for you to then tell me more about your experience.
Yeah. I love that sentence, that phrase.
Yeah.
I tell people to use that often, because I think it's very easy to assume just in general what we think people are saying based on our own lived experience.
100%.
It's, I think, a natural thing to do, right? Like we filter what we're seeing and experiencing in the world through our own lived experience. But I think for therapists specifically, like it's an important part of their training, of understanding and providing the right level of care for whoever sits in the chair with you and give them the care that they need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Can we go back and talk a little bit more about those mental health conditions that are
Yeah.
present in the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, let's
Often
do it.
present. I'm going to say again, not everyone experiences
Yeah.
them. Talked about anxiety, depression, some trauma potentially.
Mhm.
What are some usually like indicators that someone's going through clinically, like anxiety, depression, and not just, like you were mentioning earlier, responses, adequate responses to their environment, but that it might actually be something larger?
What a good question. And I think I'm noticing that it maybe would be hard to have maybe a more general kind of like, here's the cutoff, here are maybe these
Sure.
clinical skills. And so maybe, and this is another part of my soapbox, is like, if you're noticing distress, if you're experiencing distress, that's why we exist, to help you differentiate between maybe what the root system is. So part of, again, clinical practice with working with LGBTQI plus people is, how do you differentiate between root systems of presenting concerns, right? How are you assessing anxiety in a way that really honors it as a protective stance, but also doesn't subsume maybe clinical indications for things like medication or really important clinical interventions, clinically significant anxiety versus appropriate responses
Sure.
to and adaptations to unfriendly, unkind, and dangerous environments. So I would say that if you're experiencing distress, see a mental health provider, somebody who's trained and skilled, and that's part of our job, is to talk through that and take a more collaborative approach as far as better understanding what you're needing in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it is nuanced, right?
Yeah.
And finding the root cause is going to be different for everyone,
Yeah.
depending on your environment, your family structure, your support system outside of a clinical setting. Like, what does all of that look like? And
Yeah.
we'll help understand what is the root cause of it
Yeah.
all. I've heard a term, and we were kind of talking about it a little bit, but like things like masking that happens a lot in the
yeah.
LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what is masking? And
Hmm.
sometimes it shows up as a way to, again, to your point, to protect yourself, to find safety, but other times can create things like anxiety or like depression when you're
Yeah.
constantly thinking about. Anyway, can you explain to our listeners what
Yeah.
masking is and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the things that often shows up for me is how incredible we are at survival. As human beings, we are really good at assessing what's needed in order for us to maintain belonging, which then means survival, and rejection, exclusion from the group means evolutionarily. So, as human beings, we've learned to attune to our environments and to see what are the characteristics, the personalities, the expressions that are most likely to help me maintain belonging, and I'm going to replicate that. So we learn to wear masks, to perform roles, to really engage with the expectations of us from society. And like you're saying, this can often create this real void internally. For many of us as queer people, even after coming out, we then have this real challenge or this journey of trying to figure out what pieces of us are the adaptations that we've done, the performance that has helped us maintain belonging, and what pieces of us are uniquely, organically, congruently us. And so masking is that process of, again, putting on that mask, putting on the performance, kind of playing a role
Yeah.
in the hopes that we will maintain belonging. And it can create a real fatigue for us. We can be often really exhausted in trying to attune to what's required.
Yeah.
I ran a queer men's group when I was in Oregon at Oregon State University. And it was so interesting how part of what we had talked about is physiologically how adept we are at conforming and contorting ourselves into the expectations of masculinity. The way that we sit, our vocal range, for many of us, things like how we checked our nails
Yeah.
early on was used as a measure of like, oh, are you gay or not? So many of us learned to train our body to respond appropriately in those moments. And what that does is that creates a disconnection from our organic self. We've learned to distrust our organic self because that's going to lead to exclusion. So we create kind of new pathways. So we have kind of our organic response. We create a new pathway that says, I have to control and contort myself. And so we learn to really dislike and distrust ourselves and our body.
Yep. It's a form of code switching, which is, I was a language major in college, and that's where the term originated kind of, but it also just exists socially, right? Like we code switch all the time. And I experience code switching often. And I love the connection that you're making to the word belonging. It's like my thing. Like it's what I strive to do as a person, as a human being, but also as a professional, is to create environments where people feel like they belong. Because when we belong, we thrive, right? Like we can be ourselves, we can perform, we can do our jobs, we can be happy, we have access to what we need. And I love how you framed belonging for the queer community, but also just in general for people. There's so many things I want to latch onto of what you just said too, about the masking of it all and the performance that we all do. And in the spaces that I'm a part of, I often challenge men in general. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, and I think oftentimes like we're told that like this is how you perform to be dad. This is how you perform being a husband, that it has to be a specific way. And what I loved about education, my college years, that I got to do something like gender studies and dab into queer feminist theories and all this stuff, was that it challenged the way I saw my role as a person in the world, as a partner, as a son, as all the things that I am. I think this is a little bit of a tangent, but I love what I'm learning from you, and what I feel like so many of us can learn from the queer community is that there's liberation on the other end, where when we tap into living authentically, like what you said, like, like we learn, it's just small ways to like this is the way I have to. And it's like, no, what's the way you want to do this? What is the genuine expression? And so I think that's just such a beautiful way to live life.
Yeah, I love that you're talking about liberation, because I think so often what I talk about with my clients is queerness as a philosophy of liberation. I think if we look at kind of the origins of queerness, right, it originally meant odd, other, different, disruptive. It was used with violent venom against our community, right, as something like, oh, being odd, being different, being other, being queer was something unwelcome. That then we as a community have said, actually, we're going to repackage that, we're going to reclaim that, and we're actually going to really value this idea of disrupting cages, boxes, limitations that keep us contained, that keep us stuck. And so a key piece of this process is recognizing the collective liberation of queerness. I actually was just talking about queerness is not just a personal identity, it's also a collective responsibility. That as we're participating in this aspect of understanding who we are in relation to other people, understanding that my liberation is tied to your liberation, that none of us are free until all of us are free. And so really engaging in this philosophy, this community, this culture of disruption and of liberation can be a really empowering and healing process for us.
It's so beautiful. Can I share a recent story that happened to me? So I had a birthday recently, and I have a lot of friends, a lot of straight couples in my friend groups. And we went to Vegas. Had never had the experience, the atypical Vegas experience. So I was like, let's go have a typical Vegas experience. And part of what I did for our weekend was I invited everyone to a drag brunch. And I've recently, thanks to one of my really close friends, in the last couple of years, I've gotten into drag a lot. Not actually me physically into drag, but into the art of drag. I like experiencing it, and I've gone into RuPaul's Drag Race. Anyway, like it's been, so I was like, let's do drag. Like that feels like a very Vegas thing to do. And we all kind of like recapped after the performance, the brunch. And we had like these very beautiful conversations about just how, one, it's incredible talent, dancing, singing, like performing, demanding a stage. Like those are talents that anyone can have, and they have it, and it's beautiful. But then you put the performance of it all, and then, the just drag in general, and how it like challenges our notion of what is gender, what is, how do we perform our gender, and all this stuff. It just created this really beautiful conversation. To your point of just like through an art form, we're also able to unpack all this. Anyway, it's a little bit of a tangent, but what I love about how all of what we're talking about intersecting with mental health care is that it is nuanced. And I think, you know, some of our listeners might be members of the community. Some of our listeners might be mental health care providers. They might be members, family members of people in the community. Like, it's important for us to like be able to have a general understanding of what is the experience, the general experience. Again, everyone's nuanced, so that we can understand, how do we take care of them? How do we support them? How do I, if I'm that person experiencing this, how do I navigate what I'm experiencing, what I'm feeling, if I'm questioning? So I know there's a lot of nuance around something like coming out, and that so can you help me walk through, let's shift it to a conversation around people who maybe are family members or friends of people in the community. What is this successful? I'm going to say successful, and I don't know if that's the right term, but what does a successful coming out look like for not just the individual, but for someone who supports someone in the queer community?
Yeah, I love this question. It's really interesting as far as when we think about coming out. I think one of the things that I often talk about when I'm working with families is recognizing that this may be a new aspect of somebody's identity for you, but for many of us, there's a lot that happens under the surface before we get to a point of what we would call disclosure, right? There's usually this trajectory of reconciling and making sense of who we are in relation to who we were told we're supposed to be. There can often be this real wrestle because we're in these environments where we're told that this organic self is not going to be welcome, is not lovable, is rejectable, is potentially going to be dangerous to my relationship stability. So I work really hard to repress it, reduce it, restrict it. So by the time I finally come to a point of sharing that with other people, there's actually been this whole journey up to this point. So I think often what I tell families is, you also are on your journey.
Yeah.
You also are on your understanding of, what does this mean for you? I think as you were talking about things like belonging, recognizing that none of us exist in a silo and that there's actually this collective experience. I like to talk about coming out as a collective experience as opposed to an individual experience. You may have the individual experience of the queer person, and then you have the experience of the family member, the friend, the partner that's also needing to go through, what does this mean for me? This wrestle, this understanding, some research. So I think what I would consider a quote unquote successful coming out experience in an environment is space to explore and understand. I think sometimes we can pigeonhole people too quickly into, the way that I came out is the way that I need to be continually. Otherwise, I will receive pushback.
Yeah.
So a lot of the clients that I see are people who are on their journey of exploring and understanding, but they've hit this wall where they no longer want to explore or expand because they've worked so hard to, and often experience a lot of rejection in their coming out process. So the idea of understanding more about themselves potentially puts at risk all the work that they've done. But what I will tell my clients is, no past iteration of self negates a current iteration of self, and no future iteration of self negates the present iteration of self. So for families, for friends, for support systems, recognizing that this is an ongoing journey, that we're going to understand more and more about ourselves. So really honoring that process for the person that we love and for ourselves. What does this mean for us?
Yeah. I love the framing of it being a communal like experience, right? Because it is, I've had a few friends come out to me, and it is, you do feel a sense of like honor, like, thank you for sharing that part of you with me, because like, I love you, and that will never stop in an ideal world, right? That's what everyone's saying. And I try to be that for the folks that have come out to me. And it is, there is like a processing that needs to happen as the recipient of that disclosure. That does take time. And I know that well, I'm curious. I shouldn't say I know. I'm curious if that, what does that do for someone's mental health? Like, let's say, you know, you get a great response, or you get, I don't understand response. Like that could generate, I'm imagining, more feelings of either anxiety, depression, disconnection.
Yeah.
What are some of those things what are the things that you see
Yeah.
in post coming out from your queer patients?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's some research done out of San Francisco State University. Dr. Caitlin Ryan has what's called the Family Acceptance Project. And she's for over a couple decades now, been looking at what happens when a family is affirming and supportive and accepting versus when they're rejecting. And what we see is huge differences in things like anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, homelessness, problematic drug use when a family is accepting versus when a family is rejecting. So things like 50% difference. It mitigates risk factors of all of these things by 50% and increases by like 50% depending on accepting or rejecting behaviors. And so family serves a really important role in either counteracting, again, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, or increasing it. So there's a big responsibility on families, which I think is one of the real challenges, especially for us in maybe more what I would call heteronormative or cisnormative cultures or religions. Because I think what's important for me to just name and to recognize is this culture is a culture, not the culture. I think sometimes we, again, like you were talking about kind of this monolith, we can assume that every culture, every family is viewing queerness as a disruption, where there actually are evidence of other cultures historically and currently that don't only accept but have celebration around queer identities, queer experiences. And so I think, one, recognizing what the culture is of the family, but then two, what is the family doing in order to even now prep and plan for the potential for a queer person to be in their family? How can they actually start the work now rather than wait until that disclosure and then say, ooh, now I've got to completely shift my worldview. If we can actually create environments that aren't so rigid or restricting on our roles, the process of reworking that will be less difficult in the future.
I tell parents this all the time. This is my personal soapbox. I'm a parent of young kids. And I did this just the other day, like literally yesterday with my son. So my son's 8 and he's getting older and like, you know, his personality's coming out. I'm starting to like, he pushes back, he does all these things. And it was very brief. I was like, buddy, I have a really important question for you. And he's like, yeah, dad, what is it? And I was just like, you know how daddy's married to mommy? When you think about marrying someone, well, I asked him first, I was like, do you think about maybe marrying someone someday? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, when you think about marrying someone, are you married to a boy or are you married to a girl or someone else or does it matter? And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, cool. And like, I like let it go. Right. And it was just like, I think it's as parent. And again, this is a soapbox I get on for parents of young kids or people who are considering being parents. When you sign up to be a parent, you sign up truly to love that person no matter what. And I can't imagine a world where I don't love him. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional here. And so like me asking that question to me is like, I'm signaling to you that no matter what you come to me with, I will always love you. And I'm accepting of it. Like the arms are there. And I think to your point, like I think about those statistics. I've been aware of some of those where if your family rejects you, you're more likely to get into drugs or experience homelessness or have suicide ideation. Like those things, I'm like, would I want that for someone I love? My child or a friend or a colleague even at that point. Like I think as humans, we should want to care for the people around us. Anyway, that's just like my, like, you know, the way I function in life. But I think it's really important for us to just like contemplate those things. Because when those things do come up, when someone does disclose something to us, we're in a better place to receive it. It's like work that we should all be doing.
I appreciate you naming this love component because I think it's one of the things that I talk about a lot with families is I think it's really important for us to not villainize families that struggle when a child comes out. Many of the families that we work with are, again, in these environments, in these cultures, in these faith traditions that have really created this template for the human experience. So it can be really difficult and hard. And I remember when I came out, part of the wrestle between me and my mom is her best manifestation of showing me love was trying to help me live up to the standards or the expectations that she was taught would make me a good person and were aligned with her religion. And so it's this really tricky balance, I think, that I hold as I'm working with families in, again, honoring and de-villainizing families that maybe are enacting rejecting behaviors, contextualizing it, but then finding ways that we can help soften that environment for both the families and the queer people so that we have less of these rejecting behaviors and ultimately reduce some of these risk factors.
That's beautiful, because it is. I mean, at the end of the day, like, you just take anything into the equation. Like, they came out to you with like, I'm diagnosed with cancer, or they came to you with like, I'm changing jobs. Like, it could be little, big. Like, when people disclose something to us, our response when we care about that person, usually, if you really care about that person, it comes from a place of love.
Yeah.
And so, like, this taking, queer identity, and not to equate it to all of these things, because it is different.
Yeah.
But the response should be somewhere around that, and to be able to like break that down for someone, and help them see and tether it to. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do a lot of work with families, or I have done a lot of work with families. And so recognizing that families are on their own journey as well.
Sure.
I think sometimes we can meet people at a certain point in time and use that as a generalized indication of who they are as people. I know both my husband and I have been on journeys with families where initially there was more disruption, more rejection, but through this arduous process of trying to understand self and others, we've actually been able to repair and reclaim a lot of our relationship. And so this is also maybe a little plug for families allowing themselves some hope that this is a journey, this is a process, and that a point in time is not indicative of the entire relationship trajectory.
Yeah. And you do see that, right? I think we're all human.
Yeah.
We're trying our best.
Yeah.
People can change.
Yeah.
That's also, I think, another tether that I hold on to is that, people can change, people can evolve. Where maybe once there was rejection, it could be replaced with love.
Hopefully. Cross our fingers. Yeah.
I hope that's the direction we move into as a society.
Me too.
As we've been talking about, we could accept love, we could get rejection. I know the term fight or flight, right, comes to mind. Like, you're going to respond in some way, especially to something like rejection. Like, how do you help your clients who are in that mode to cope, to navigate an environment where they are in a fight or flight mode?
It makes me think so often about how for LGBTQIA plus people, we often see how present shame is for them, which as I've been kind of on this journey of understanding how to increase competence and confidence for therapists working with LGBTQIA plus people, I came up with an acronym for shame, which is sociocultural and historical adaptations to mitigate exclusion. So we've, again, like we were talking about, we're in these environments that continually tell us that a certain aspect of self is going to mean exclusion, rejection, and for us as human beings, as animals, potential death. So we go through all these strategies like we were talking about, kind of this mask or this performance. And so I feel like one of the key pieces for us to move out of fight or flight mode, one is to normalize and really celebrate the fact that we were able to survive. That this posed a potential threat for us. So our fight or flight is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And then moving from, again, that adaptation mode into how do we rework our nervous system to find safety in ourselves, to actually not be at war with ourselves, to be able to differentiate between hypervigilance that is going to keep me safe and hypervigilance that is a residual from feeling like there's a part of me that is rejectable.
Yep.
So a key piece that I also like to talk about with my clients is not internalizing the messages that we're given. I think the tricky thing that we're in is we are receiving lots of messages that were rejectable and unlovable. The environment actually isn't safe. So what I want to be really mindful of is part of my job is not to help my clients acclimate to their systems of oppression. I don't want to give people coping strategies so that they're actually less hypervigilant, which means that they're more at risk for potential harm in this world. And we want to allow people to move from maybe an automatic response to a chosen response. how do I engage intentionally in this process so that I can recognize and differentiate between potential danger and, like we were saying, residual adaptations? I don't know if I answered the question.
No, I love how you answered it though, because what I'm also hearing is like it's important for you as a provider to not gaslight your the person's experience, right? Like you want them one to yes have calm down, right? Like move away from a fight or flight mode, but also at the same time honor that fighting or flying away from a situation is usually, to your point,
Yeah.
a survival mechanism,
Yep.
something that's telling you, your nervous system is telling you you need to get away or you
Yeah.
need to find a way to survive.
Yeah.
So like you want to honor that. And that's, I mean, trauma is kind of like that too, right? Like it's, you need to figure out a way out of it to protect you. And that's why you're experiencing that. But at the same time,
Yep.
you do want to be able to find, and that's why and this is what I love about the queer community too, is the community part of it all.
Yeah.
Like I think oftentimes when I'm around queer people, and they invite you into their spaces, man, I don't think there is any other community where I have seen so much love and acceptance and like welcoming. And I think it comes from a place of, because you have felt so much rejection, that when you're invited to even just observe what that space looks like,
Yeah.
it is beautiful, because I think that helps move people away from the fight or flight, being able to find chosen family, being able to find people who love and accept you, community organizations where you can go and like feel that you can be your authentic self. Like that, I think being able to have, if you are in a fight or flight situation, being able to have an environment where it's not that, so that you can then calibrate your barometer on, am I fighting or flighting because of my safety or because it's a learned behavior? And, I don't know if that makes any sense, but that barometer of understanding what is right and what is too much.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're talking about one kind of the community. I think that is one of the real strengths of LGBTQIA plus community relationship spaces, is because we've understood the sting of rejection. Many of us are really focused on providing spaces where we are accepted, celebrated, where we really get to rest. And I think that's one of the key pieces that I often teach my clients is, if we're in fight or flight mode, when and how can we actually rest? Our nervous system is designed to be a sprint, not a marathon. So it's meant to activate when we're in environments that are unsafe, get us out of that unsafe environment into a place where then we can rest.
Yeah.
Part of what I tell my clients is the trickiness is, where is safe for us? Where is actually safe for us? We're interacting with a fear that feels sociocultural. It's a sociocultural trauma.
Yeah.
So I talk about with also the therapists that I either consult with or I supervise, part of our role is we're often taught to treat trauma as something that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And we often see clients after, say, like the car crash, and we help them process the trauma and their trauma responses to the car crash. The way that I reconceptualize it is, what would happen if we're in the car with our client as the crash is happening? As the nervous system is activating in that moment, what tools, what skills would we then use to help the client navigate through the activation of the nervous system to have it not get stuck? And again, I think one of the key pieces is not internalizing that. I think a lot of the trauma that we experience is that we're the problem, that we're wrong. We start to believe the messages that we're given. But then also in contrast, where can we reclaim rest? Where can we reclaim ease? If my body has been tense all day because I've been cueing into how I'm sitting and how I'm checking my fingernails as to whether it's appropriate or not appropriate, when can I actually just ease and be? A lot of the things that I also teach my clients to do are things like pleasure. We've been taught that pleasure, joy, celebration, yumminess is something to be fought against. And so when can we actually reclaim that and do a lot of that? So things like eating something that's super yummy just for the sake of yumminess can actually be a recalibration of our nervous system. Reminding ourselves that we deserve yumminess, we deserve rest, we deserve joy just for the sake of joy, not something to be earned.
Yeah. It was a book I read in my graduate studies called Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Murray Brown. It taught me so much.
Yeah.
That reclamation of joy,
Yep.
of pleasure, of just enjoying it as a form of resistance
Yeah.
and liberation. Back to that word that we were talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah. June is coming up. Probably by the time this episode comes out, it'll be June, which is Pride Month. And Pride Month comes with a lot of feelings, I think, I have a lot of feelings about it because
Yeah.
I think sometimes it's, a marketing tool and
Yeah.
but at its core, I think it's meant to remind both members of the community and members out of the community just the importance of, of not just feeling pride, but the price that had to be paid in order to feel pride
Yeah.
in who you are and what you are. So for those that are experiencing grief, joy, like what do you tell people during this time of the year or any time of the year where they're quarreling with like, can I experience joy? Is this a sad month for me? Is this a good time for the year for me? Like, how do you help your clients through that?
Yeah, what a great question. And it is such a tension. And I think one of the things that I often say, another one of my little phrases that I often talk about is pride was a protest before it was a party or a parade. So recognizing the lineage of pride is real protest against a proclamation that we deserve to take up space, we deserve to celebrate ourselves. And so reminding my clients that one, we have an ancestry and a transcestry of protest and party. That we actually get to be a both and rather than an either or. In a lot of ways, that's part of the magic and the beauty of queerness is rather than viewing things as rigid or separate or siloed, we get to play around in kind of the messiness, the togetherness, the both andness of it. And I think that that's a therapeutic skill as well, being able to hold joy with sorrow rather than saying, I can only feel one of these things. What if we felt both of them?
Yep.
And what if actually they inform each other in a really beautiful human way as opposed to being contradictory or at war with each other?
Yeah.
So that's often what I talk about with my clients is both get to exist. We get to celebrate all aspects of self, including the joy, the sorrow, the commercialization or the marketing, right? The idea of like, why is Chase Bank at the Pride Parade? And also, please support us, Chase Bank, because everyone else feels like they're like against us. I don't know if Chase Bank actually supports us, but somebody like that, right?
Yeah,
like
sure.
these different corporations like changing their logo, which I think maybe brings us back to that idea of finding a therapist, right? That idea of how are we following up on things like changing our logos, saying that we're affirming with the deep-rooted work of collective liberation and providing safety for our clients rather than just helping them try to experience the car crash that is this world with less pain. I actually want to keep my clients from having to go through the car crash.
I feel like we're just barely scratching the surface and
Yeah.
we've been talking, I don't even know, I've lost track of time. One of the segments we do on the podcast is our listeners send us questions and we like to throw them out as rapid fire. So can we get a little rapid fire questions going?
I'm ready.
Again, we probably will want to dive into some of these, which we probably could a little bit, but your first response on these. Is it normal to feel depressed after a big step like coming out?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that concise enough or should I go?
No, I want you to be like, tell me more. But yeah, it can't. Well, actually, yeah, tell me more. Why is that common? Why can that happen?
Well, yeah, I just think like what we often see is kind of there's balance. And so the work and the effort and the lead up to something big and monumental, we often then need like a come down. So it makes a whole lot of sense that we have this anticipatory anxiety. Often we see anxiety and depression go together because of things like nervous system activation and then deactivation. So the high and the low. And so this idea of worry, stress, that's why when you have a big presentation and you're like, oh no, am I going to do okay? And then afterwards you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, I'm a little slug on the couch, right? This idea of like, that makes a whole lot of sense. And as we bring in things like family rejection can influence that. So making sure that you have plenty of support after coming out, I think is a really important thing.
I love that. Thank you. How do I tell if my anxiety is about safety or self-judgment or both? And we've talked quite a bit about this.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, if I could put another plug for therapy, I think that's part of the work of therapy. I think so much of the work that I do is really trying to reattune with self. I think that's the biggest process that we have to do as queer people. And so that feels like a process of how do you go internal? How are you curious about and how are you differentiating between these parts? It's a clinical practice. So I would say
Find
the
a good therapist.
Yeah.
Find a really good therapist to be able to tell.
Yeah.
What do I do when I cannot be fully out at work or with my family?
Oh, yeah. I think maybe first and foremost, kind of just honoring the difficulty of that. I think many of us have to make those concessions in order to stay safe. And so I really want to honor that outness is a real privilege and not something that all of us get to do. And then I think, again, the biggest thing, I know I keep going back to it, is finding ways to not internalize that the reason why you have to not be out is because there's something inherently wrong with you, but rather that this is your adaptation to the environment.
Yep.
I think that helps us not, again, feel some of the effects of this, recognizing that we get to put it on and put it off rather than believing the lie that there's something wrong about me that needs to be hidden.
Yeah. That differentiation, I think, is so important.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. How can I support my partner without becoming their therapist?
Oh, what a great question. One, I maybe want to share solidarity in kind of that intersection. I think the biggest thing is, one, not taking on the responsibility of what our partners or the people in our life, our relationships do, can be a helpful kind of differentiation, and making sure that they have a therapist could be really helpful. I think everyone should have a good therapist. Yeah, I think that's the quick fire answer. I think there's probably more nuance and complexity to that.
For sure. I mean, as someone who is married and my partner comes to me with a myriad of things,
Yeah.
and it's I think just a natural tension in wanting to be supportive of someone, but when they're going through something big like
Yeah.
trauma or stress or anxiety or depression, like you want to be there for them, but at the same time, it's like, and I know that it's nuanced in like
Yeah.
a queer environment. If I could add anything to it,
Yeah.
it's just knowing when to say, hey, I think I'm too in the weeds in this with you, that I can't give you an objective or like response, or that's what I have found helpful with me and my partner with things that we've dealt with, of just like, I'm in it with you too. So like I have a point of view, but it's also informed by the fact that we're doing life together. So like maybe we should find a third party.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's making me think of, I think I have a better answer for it now,
Sure.
Which is the roles are very different. I feel like when you're in a relationship, your goal is connection. That's it. You actually don't need to figure it out for your partner or your partners. You don't need to have solutions. You don't need to give them coping skills. Your job is to stay connected with that person. As a therapist, my job is to particularly kind of find, quote unquote, what the problem is and to help with what that problem is. So that's my job, to give the skills, to talk through, to make sense of that. But your job as a partner is just to stay connected.
Yeah. That's really good. What's one phrase allies should stop saying, and what should they say instead?
Well, it's interesting. And maybe this is a little bit of my like kind of frustration soapbox.
I love it. I'm here for it.
But maybe part of it is like, I kind of wish that we could move away from the word ally. I know that some people talk about things like accomplice or kind of an activist, like really engaged in the process of dismantling. I feel like ally sometimes furthers the us versus them, the othering that happens, where it's like, oh, I'm in this stance, but I want to make sure that you know that I'm just an ally or I'm an ally. And so rather than an us and them, it's an us. We're in this together. So having more of a collective process, again, this collective liberation, we really are in this together. And so viewing that maybe would be something that I would invite or offer, though I love my allies. Yay, allies.
I know.
We need more.
I feel you so hard on that, because
Yeah.
like there is a inherently in the word ally, an ally to any community. I'm an ally to women. I'm an ally to people of color. It just feel like it's you and me, like it's us, them kind of a thing. And what I love about it, and this is just, again, this is who I am as a person, and I've learned to appreciate this part of me, but it's us.
Yep.
It's always us.
Yeah.
We're all human beings. We're all going through life for the first time together. Like you have maybe have more years on me or I have more years on you. I don't know. But like technically this is the first time in our conscious brains that we're going through life together through life, you know? And so it's like, I should give you what I would hope I would receive in whatever way. And so to your point, like, I don't want to take away the term ally because I think allyship is an important aspect, but to remove that us, them, I think would be, it's so nuanced.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we at a large scale that we're ready to get into that nuance, but I would love for that to exist.
Yeah. Someday. Yeah.
Someday. How do I find community if I don't feel like I fit in the typical LGBTQIA plus scene?
Yeah, what a great question. I think one of the things that I want to name that is, I think it's been really hard for me as I've been also kind of part of this community to recognize how pervasive the collective trauma is in, like I said, on one hand, we can be really helpful or really good and adept at welcoming and celebrating. And we still have some of those traumatic pieces where we just extend the cage or the box to include us, but continue to create parameters of who's welcome and who's not welcome. So I think our community has more work to do to actually heal rather than replicating these cages. So one, recognizing that it's not your fault, but it's the fault of the system and the environment and the trauma that we're all experiencing. There's another piece which is, this probably is an unsatisfactory answer, but finding your community that includes queerness, but maybe isn't centralized in queerness. Queerness can often sometimes perpetuate certain bodies, certain experiences, even certain like race, ethnicity, genders. And so recognizing that queerness gets to be a part of our identity, but isn't only
the only part of
our only identity. And so if it's like, oh, I like board games, there are certain places like Legendarium, I believe, that's kind of right by our office, has like board game nights. And so finding places that are queer celebratory, maybe not queer centric, but centric on board games. Or if you like outdoors stuff, or if you like a certain show, again, finding kind of those overlaps. I know that community exists, and I think that's one of the hardest things for us. And so being open to how you may find community, and I guess maybe the grief and the call to action for our community to be more inclusive of people who don't fit the traditional expectations of queerness.
And again, going back to like all of our responsibility, right? Like we all have a responsibility of making every community space queer friendly, queer accepting, right? Like if I'm into working out, I hope that the gym that I go to would be welcoming if a trans person walked through the door, right? Or if I'm into coffee shops, I want to go to the coffee shops that make sure that everyone, you know, like it's just like, and again, on the ally of it all, like we all have that responsibility of like holding whatever communal space we're a part of and ensuring that it is a welcoming space to all.
I agree.
I love that. I love that. Love that. I could honestly talk to you for another hour, if not more. To wrap things up, if one of our listeners is struggling, what would you want them to take away? What are 2 or 3 things you'd want them to take away from our conversations, or even a step that you'd want them to take if they're struggling with their identity or with finding a therapist or any of the things we've talked about?
Yeah, let's see here. I think the first thing that came up for me as you were talking about when somebody's struggling is I think one of the hardest parts of all of this is the isolation and the loneliness. And so I think the thing that I want to offer is you don't have to do it alone. So much of, I think, our work is together, recognizing that we're in this together, really honoring that togetherness. And so just wanting to offer that togetherness, right? That their fight is my fight, their struggle is my struggle, their healing is my healing. So there's this communal and collective care. One of the things that I often talk about is to divide and conquer. And so the antidote is to connect and commune. And so really trying to push that forward as far as like we're in this together. And then as far as like steps towards like finding a therapist or doing therapy, part of it is like the simplicity of like, do it. It can feel really scary. It can feel really overwhelming, and it can be really helpful. And so if there's any sort of hesitation, like playing around with interviewing different therapists. Maybe the first step is just Google search on affirming therapists or LGBTQI plus therapists. And then maybe the next step, like breaking that down into small bite-sized pieces as opposed to I have to do this thing right away, but moving in the direction of getting the care that you need.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for those steps. Where can people find you? Like where are you located? What kind of services can you provide if people are interested in getting to know you or your practice more?
Yeah. So we are Simple Modern Therapy. We're located in downtown Salt Lake in the Milk Block on 9th. Really cute, awesome. We love our neighbors there. So you can visit us at simplemodern.org. Also social media, we're at Simple Modern Therapy. And then my personal is / professional is Ala Brown 22. So ALABROWN 22, which we do a lot of kind of content. We work with primarily queer relationships, but we also do queer identity development, trauma, sociocultural trauma. We have this catchphrase that we work with, quote unquote, everyone else here in Utah, working with people who often feel othered in lots of different ways. We try to create a space where other is centered.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And for our regular listeners, you could always talk to us at A New Therapy. We are one of those queer-friendly spaces. That's not necessarily our specialty, but our providers, our care coordinators, everyone that you'll meet at A New Therapy is happy and ready to assist you with ketamine-assisted therapy, talk therapy, bravado, anything that you might need. You could always visit anewtherapyutah.com or text the number on our site. Andres, thank you so much for enlightening me, enlightening our listeners, for sharing your knowledge, your expertise. I have so appreciated having you here.
Thanks for having me.